My name is Pamela. I'm 68 years old and have more memories than objects in this house. I was a teacher for almost 4 decades, a widow for 12 years, the mother of an only child, and, until recently, a kind of sentimental and financial bank disguised as a woman. Have you ever wondered what leads a mother, who has always given everything, to block all of her own child's cards? That's that. This happened to me. And it happened the day he called me, desperate, because he couldn't pay for lunch. Neither him, nor his mother-in-law. Maybe you're watching this with a heavy heart, because you've also felt that they valued your money more than your name. Or maybe you're trying to understand how someone kind, like I've been all my life, gets to this point. But I promise you one thing. If you stay with me until the end, you will understand how silence can become strength. How a woman who has been forgotten can stand up in silence, without shouting, without scandal, only with dignity. Because sometimes, the only answer we need to give is the cancellation of a card. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. No one ever blocks all of their child's cards on impulse. When the phone rang that morning, and I heard Esteban, in a trembling voice, saying, "Mama, why were all the cards declined? We are at El Cardinal with Mariana's mom, and we can't afford lunch," I was no longer the same. On the other end of the line, there was a desperate man. Here on this side, just silence, and a still hot cup of coffee in my hand. What happened between that call and everything that preceded it? That's what you'll understand now. But before I open my heart, can I ask you something? If this story has already touched a little piece of your soul, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Sometimes we just need to know that there is someone on the other side who understands. Telling this is not easy, but if there is a woman listening to me right now and thinking this could be me, then it was worth it, because no one should have to go through this alone. And I've spent too much time in silence. I have always been a routine woman. I wake up early, even before the sun gilds the tiles of the houses here in Tlaquepaque. I like to smell the coffee rising in the kitchen as the kettle sizzles softly. I turn on the old radio, the same one Ramon gave me on our 10th wedding anniversary, and let the rancheras he liked so much play, Javier Solis, Chavela Vargas. Sometimes, I sing softly along, with a hoarse voice, just to feel that he still hears. Then I go to the garden. I take care of my roses with affection. Each plant there has a story, a memory, a piece of me. Señora Marta, my neighbor in the blue house, always calls me over the fence. "Pamela, these roses are more beautiful than ever, woman." And we start talking about life, health, the news of the city, and how children change when they grow up. She also has one that barely shows up. We laugh, but it's a bit of a crooked laugh, you know? I remember well the time when Esteban was studying at ITESO. I worked twice as hard at that time, taught in the morning and at night, just to be able to pay the tuition on time. There were months when I stopped buying medicine for myself so he wouldn't lack anything, and I never complained. It was my boy, my only son. When he met Mariana, I thought it was a passing thing. She was all modern, too elegant, full of certainties. She called me Doña Pamela from the beginning, as if I were a distant lady, a formality. He never looked me in the eye for long. Not that she was rude. She was cold, practice, those who arrive looking at where the silver cutlery is. The marriage was quick. Esteban seemed hypnotized. After that, the visits became more spaced out. But the calls for help? These never stopped. That's how I ended up paying for their first car, a brand new Nissan. Esteban asked me, saying that it was a little push to start life. Mariana wanted an automatic car, said she didn't know how to drive an old car. And I, silly, signed the papers. Then came the renovation of the apartment they bought in Zapopan. Mariana said she needed a larger closet, a planned kitchen, a bathroom with a bathtub. I lent it. Then I lent it again. I never saw a penny back. I also paid for her graduation. Psychology. "You're going to be honored, Mama," Esteban said. On the day of the ceremony, they put me in the back, away from the main table. Mariana took pictures only with her mother. I was left with a glass of soda in my hand and a lump in my throat. And on commemorative dates, Esteban's birthday, expensive gift. Mariana made a point of sending me the link to what he was wanting this year. I bought it. And on my birthday, Sometimes a supermarket bouquet, bought in a hurry. Sometimes not even that. Nevertheless, I followed. Because a mother who is a mother can handle it. Or at least that's what I was taught. That a mother's love has no limit. But there is, see? The first time I felt this tightness in my chest was on a Sunday. Esteban came to visit me, brought Mariana along. She was on her cell phone the whole time. She didn't even take off her sunglasses. I made food, dessert, even prepared the cinnamon coffee that she likes. And when I went to offer a piece of pie, she didn't even look at me. She said, "Oh, I can't. My nutritionist banned sugar. But thank you, Doña Pamela." With a fake smile. I kept the pie, and I kept the feeling. But that day, a different silence was born within me. There is a time when we stop waiting. I can't explain it well when it happens, but it is as if a key turned from the inside. A gentle sadness, almost without sound, begins to take up space, and you understand that you are no longer seen as a mother, but as a resource. If you've ever felt this, that feeling of having been exchanged for convenience, of no longer being love, but obligation, comment here with "I believe" or "I've lived it." I read all the comments, see? Because I know I'm not the only one. But what made this silence turn into a decision? What pushed me for good was not the contempt at lunch, nor the endless requests. It was a single sentence. And this sentence, I heard it inside my own house. Want to know what it was? Then he listens to what happened the next afternoon. It was there that everything began to change. That Saturday afternoon, the sun was lazily beating down on my porch, and I was watering the plants when I heard the gate open. It was Mariana. It didn't even hit. He entered as if he were entering a warehouse, without a good afternoon, without even taking off his sunglasses. "I just came to pick up the order from the store that I had delivered here, okay?" That's what he said, already with his cell phone glued to his ear. She walked through the room as if I were invisible, picked up the box and left, leaving the door open behind her. I stood still, with a wet hand holding the watering can. He didn't even look at me. Not a thank you. Not a gesture. And, the worst, as if that house, my house, it was just a collection point for her. When the gate slammed, I just turned off the tap, went in slowly, and went to the kitchen. I put a coffee for myself, even though I didn't feel like it. I sat at the table with a heavy heart, and there, looking at Ramon's empty chair, I felt like asking out loud, is this how a relationship ends? Gradually, with silences, with indifference. But I didn't say anything. Esteban arrived only the following week to ask for money. "An unmissable deal, Mom," was what he said. "An investment opportunity." He didn't ask how I was, nor did he mention Mariana's visit. I listened to everything quietly, with a fragile smile, and in the end, I went to the room to get that money. I delivered it doubled, as I always did. He kissed me on the forehead and left in a hurry, and I stood there, with the smell of his perfume in the air, and a question stuck in my throat. Does he see me as a mother or as a bank? After that, the little things started to hurt more. Mariana never called me by name again. It was always Esteban's mama, or she. I never included myself in the photos, nor in the plans, and when he came, he was playing with his cell phone, as if every minute there was torture. I tried to start a conversation, talked about the flowers, the recipes, the neighbors, but she always responded with, "Oh yes," or "That's cool," and slid her finger on the screen again. There was a day when she said right in front of me, "I'm exhausted. Staying here drains me." Esteban laughed. I pretended I didn't hear, but I listened. And that phrase stuck to me like dust that we can't get rid of. At night, when the house fell silent, I found myself reviewing the past. The nights when Esteban had a fever, and I spent hours with a damp cloth on his forehead. The day he fell off his bike and I ran barefoot down the street to help him. The toys I made with cans and cloths, because we didn't have money to buy new ones. The sleepless nights correcting tests while he slept. All of this came to me like a movie, but now with a different tone, a bitter tone, as if each memory was asking me, was it worth it? And I still didn't have the answer. But one thing I knew, that discomfort was growing. It started as a sting, then it turned into itching, then burning. It was my soul telling me something was wrong. I didn't know what to do yet. I just knew it was hurting. And it was in this atmosphere, between accumulated sorrows and forced smiles, that I prepared an afternoon coffee to welcome them again. A special coffee, one of those that I usually make on dates that remind me of Ramon. But what happened that afternoon? No one was prepared to listen, much less me, because it was in that room, with the table set and the smell of sweet bread in the air, that a single sentence, one, changed everything. Do you want to know what she said? So it is. Because that's when my heart broke for good. That day, I had woken up with a lighter heart. It was the day of my old wedding anniversary with Ramon, and even so many years after his departure, I was still in the habit of preparing an afternoon coffee just for me, as if he was still there, sitting in front of me, laughing at my stories. I made the corn fritters he loved, set the table with the lacy tablecloth we got on our first Christmas together, and prepared the cinnamon coffee just the way he liked it. But this time, I decided to invite Esteban and Mariana. I thought it would be beautiful to share a little of this memory with them. Esteban agreed to come, and even said that he would bring 2 friends from the capital who were staying with them. Mariana didn't even ask the reason for the coffee. I just said, "Okay, let's go there." They arrived in the middle of the afternoon, talking loudly, laughing at something I didn't understand. They brought red wine, those expensive ones, and a ready-made cake from the bakery. I thanked him, even though I did everything with my own hands. Their friends were nice, but I soon realized that they didn't know very well who I was. Mariana only said, "It's Esteban's mommy. She loves doing these meetings," as if it were a silly whim of a needy old woman. They all sat in the living room, and I was serving the coffee, the cookies, passing sugar, trying to smile. Mariana talked about the trips she wanted to make, the trendy restaurants, the yoga courses. One of the friends asked how they managed to afford all this with the current cost of living. Mariana chuckled and said, as if telling a weightless joke, "La Señora Pamela, it only serves to pay our bills, right?" Everyone laughed. Everyone. Even Esteban. In that second, time stopped for me. The cup of coffee trembled in my hand. I froze. The whole room seemed colder. I didn't hear anything else after that. Just that sentence. Echoing. It only serves to pay our bills. They said my name as if it were a credit card, a paid bill, a transfer app. Esteban didn't even bother. He did not defend. It did not correct it. Laughed, as if it were normal. I took a deep breath. I swallowed the bitter taste of shame. I faked a smile and continued serving the dumplings as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was in ruins. They continued the conversation, talking about plans, renovations, restaurants. Mariana still had the audacity to say, "You should buy those new chairs I showed you. They would look beautiful here." And he laughed. He laughed as if he knows he will make it. I just shook my head. The visit lasted another hour, and at the end, when they left, Mariana gave me a kiss on the cheek and said, "Thank you, Doña Pamela. It was great," as if he were talking to an employee. I closed the door calmly. I looked at the table still with cake crumbs. The lace towel had a burgundy stain on it. I picked up each cup carefully, as if picking up invisible shards. I washed everything. I kept everything. I went to the bedroom, and I didn't sleep that night. I lay looking at the ceiling, listening to the crickets outside, feeling Ramon so far away. I felt an emptiness that I can't explain, as if my name had been ripped out of my mouth. That morning, for the first time, I whispered to myself, "I'm not just good for paying the bill." And at that moment, a part of me woke up. But what would that part do? How could a lady alone, soft-spoken, regain respect without raising her voice? The answer began to dawn the next morning, when I decided to tell everything, first for myself, then to a blue notebook that had been stored for years in the last drawer of the desk. And what I wrote there, it was the beginning of my plan. Do you want to know what was in that notebook? So hold on tight, because now comes the most dangerous part of this whole story. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, my head spinning like a carousel of memories, and each lap was a cut, an old wound that hurt again. I saw Esteban's little face small, with that school uniform that I sewed with pieces of cloth that were left over from the clothes of the other students. I remember as if it were yesterday his joy when he received his first notebook with the superhero cape. I saved up coins for 3 weeks to buy that. 3 weeks. He jumped around the house as if he had won the world. The Sunday afternoons I spent correcting tests at the kitchen table, while he watched cartoons on television. I worked double, tripled, without ever saying, "I'm tired," because being a mother, for me, has always been a verb of action, never of demand. Then I remembered my mother's jewelry, an old gold ring, an antique brooch, the only ones I kept for sentimental value. I sold everything on the day Esteban said he needed the deposit for the first apartment. He said, "Mama, it's just this push. I'll give it back to you as soon as I can." He never returned. And he never asked me again if I missed the jewelry. And Mariana. Mariana. When he decided he needed to look more professional, he came with a catalog in his hand. "I want to renew my whole wardrobe, Doña Pamela. Will you help me?" I bought dresses, shoes, even expensive bags. On the card, of course. Installments. She didn't even blink. I opened a drawer in the middle of the night and started pulling out old photos. I saw Esteban as a child, hugging me in the schoolyard. I saw Ramon and I with my faces still young, full of dreams, full of plans that never included pain. And then I saw recent photos of them, in Cancun, in Tulum, in Valle de Bravo, places I've never been, and that I paid. I saw Mariana in a very expensive spa, posting on Instagram, and I was there, holding a yellowed photo, with trembling hands. It was as if everything I had built had been ripped from me and sold, paid in installments, diluted until not even my name remained. At that time I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went to the desk, opened the last drawer, and took my blue notebook. A notebook that I kept for years, waiting for a purpose. And that morning, he became my mirror. I wrote the first sentence with a firm hand. Everything I gave for love. But now I write, so I don't forget myself. I listed the aids, the favors, the loans, the payments, one by one, off the top of my head, from memory, from the extracts he still kept. I started from the back, the college tuition, the car, the furniture, the graduation, the gifts, the bills paid in silence. Each item looked like a reopened scar, and next to each value, I wrote a memory, a thank you that never came, a gesture that never happened. It took hours of writing. The coffee was cooling next to me, but I didn't feel it. I needed to register, not by others. For me, for the woman I was, for the woman she still wanted to be. When the sun came up, I already knew. Something needed to change. I didn't know how yet, but I was no longer going to allow my name to be used as a line of credit. I was going to find a way out of this place where they put me, this shelf of conveniences that they call mom when they need it. No, I'm here opening my heart, telling my story with all the courage I gathered. If you're listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I still have a lot of things in store to tell you, because there are pains that only we understand. But when someone listens, it seems that the soul breathes a little better, and it was with this blue notebook in my hands and a heavy silence in my chest that I decided my story was not going to end like this. And the first step? Oh, he would come soon. But it was not with words. It was with stocks. Want to know what it was? So get ready. Because what I did afterwards was the beginning of the end of that woman who accepted everything quietly. For the next 2 days, I hung up the phone. I left him there, on the living room table, in silence, without vibrating, without calling me. Esteban called. Mariana, too. Several times. But I didn't answer. He didn't want to hear empty excuses, nor sweet voices with bitter intentions. I needed to stay with myself, to listen to my own heart, which had been whispering for a long time, and I pretended not to listen. I woke up early, as always. I watered my roses more carefully than usual. I talked quietly with them, as I had done when Ramon was still alive. So beautiful, even without applause. You continue to flourish. I sat on the porch and watched the swallows flying from one side to the other. I like swallows. They are faithful to the nest, but they know when to leave. Then I went to the bakery on the corner. Senora Marta saw me and waved from afar. "You're missing, Pamela." I just smiled, with that smile that doesn't give anything away. I bought 2 loaves of bread, came back slowly, feeling the sun warm my shoulders. When I arrived, I sat down at the table with my coffee and opened the blue notebook. I was ready to finish what I started that morning. I wrote down every expense, every help, every installment, every loan that never came back. I started way back. The car I bought, the plane tickets for their trip to Merida, Mariana's graduate tuition, the furniture for the new house, the electronics that Esteban wanted to facilitate the home office. I wrote down Christmas gifts, Birthdays with suppers that I prepared and paid for myself. Lunches in restaurants that they asked for, to vary a little of your food, Mom. I even wrote the gifts I bought for Mariana's mother-in-law, just to please. I wrote everything down. Every penny. When I finished and disappeared, the number paralyzed me. 1,700,000 pesos. 1,700,000 Mexican pesos came out of my hands, from my retirement, from the savings that Ramon and I had saved for decades. All delivered, like this, in the name of love. I closed the notebook carefully. I took a deep breath. I felt my hands cold, but I didn't cry. This time I didn't cry. I felt an anger that I had never felt before. Not that anger that screams. Not the one who breaks dishes or curses. No, it was a cold anger. White. Silent. Like when we tidy up a forgotten drawer, full of things we no longer use, and realize how much space was being taken up for nothing. I got up, went to the living room mirror, and stared at my face. The wrinkles were there, each with its own story, but my eyes were steady. For the first time in years, I saw steadfastness in them, and I knew it was time to do what I never had the courage to do. But I wasn't going to warn anyone, nor argue, nor fight. I was just going to change, and my first attitude was the simplest and the most symbolic. That same afternoon, I picked up the phone, called the bank, asked for the cancellation of the additional cards. Then I logged into the app and reset my passwords. All access that Esteban had, direct or indirect, was removed. Nobody taught me how to do that. I did it on instinct, in the impulse of pain that turned into courage. I turned off the computer. I sat down again on the porch, and I had a second coffee. It was just the beginning. But there, at that moment, I knew they would feel it. The question is, how did they react when the cards stopped working? You'll see. And you may be surprised by who had the biggest crisis, because sometimes it's not who you think. I did everything in silence. I called the bank right after lunch, spoke in a firm voice, firmer than I expected, and asked for the cancellation of all additional cards. I went one by one. Joint savings account with Esteban? Closed. Card that Mariana used in my name? Canceled. Direct debits, scheduled transfers, everything removed. Each click was like a key turning inside me, locking an old door that had always been ajar, waiting for someone to enter without knocking. I didn't write a note. I didn't send a message. He didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I did something thinking only of myself. And you know what? I didn't feel selfish. I felt clean. Then I turned off the computer, walked to the patio, and sat down among my rose bushes. The smell of wet earth, the distant sound of cars on the street, and silence. A different silence. It wasn't that heavy silence that visited me on days of solitude. It was a new, light silence. A silence of freedom. I drank my coffee with both hands. Alone. But I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. Deep down, I knew the phone was going to ring. That they would feel. That the first reaction would be despair, not regret. But I was no longer worried about what they would take away from me. For the first time, I wanted to see what I could give back to myself. And look, if you've come this far, listening to my outburst, I'll only tell you one thing. Don't leave now. No, because what comes next, it's what marked me the most. To this day, when I close my eyes, I remember the sound of his voice on that call. It was there that everything turned. That afternoon, I went to wash the dishes for lunch, as I always do. The water ran in my hands, and I thought of Ramon. He would always say, "Pamela, you give too much. One day they will empty you." And they emptied. But at that moment, I was filling myself up again. By night, the phone finally rang, and it rang again. I let it call, twice. Then I hung up. When he called the third time, I answered. And what I heard on the other side, you need to listen with your own ears, because there are things that we don't forget. There are words that mark like a knife, but there are also those that finally set us free. Do you know what was the first sentence that Esteban said to me? So prepare your heart, because it will hurt, and it will heal, all at the same time. The next morning it was 9:12 a.m. when the phone rang. I looked at the screen. Esteban. My son's name shone there as if it were an old wound being poked again. I took a deep breath and answered, "Mama, why are all the cards blocked? We are at El Cardinal with Mariana's mommy and we can't pay." His voice trembled. Behind. I heard the confusion. Mariana excited, talking loudly, almost screaming. A waiter said something about solving it soon, because they had been occupying a table for more than 40 minutes. I was silent for a few seconds. Not for lack of response, but because, in that pause, I felt everything. I felt the forgotten birthdays, the meals I cooked alone, the photos of the trips I never went to. I felt my mother's brooch being sold. I felt the pie refused. I felt the "it's only good to pay." All that came, like a tide. But this time, I didn't sink. And then, with the calmest voice I had in me, I replied, "Because I've decided I'm not going to fund what doesn't include me anymore." On the other end of the line, silence. A heavy silence. He tried to argue. "Mama, this is crazy. We are in public. There are people here." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "Welcome to what I have lived in silence for years." And I hung up. I sat there, with the phone in my hand, with no emotion on my face, but with a firm heart, because sometimes we don't scream to be heard. We silence to be respected. I kept thinking about how many times I swallowed my pride so as not to cause discomfort, and how many conversations I listened to silently, and how many times I stopped being myself to keep the peace. But there is a type of love that, when it is not recognized, turns into absence. And when absence becomes choice, it's because something died back there. If you've ever felt this, that moment when something inside you shuts down, not out of malice, but out of exhaustion, comment here, "I understand you," or "I know how it is." It's good to know that we're not alone when we decide to stop giving away what no one else values. And that morning, with the coffee cooling on the table and their screams still echoing in my mind, I got up slowly, went to the mirror, and looked at myself with the frankness of someone who is tired of lying to herself. The woman who looked back at me was not weak. She was a whole woman, wounded, yes, but conscious and prepared, because from that moment on, I knew that the silent war had begun. But what did Esteban do next? What did he try to bend me again? Oh, then the story takes another turn, and you need to see how he reacted when he realized that the money wasn't coming back anytime soon. And worse, that respect is not bought after it has already been lost. It was almost noon when I heard the engine of the car approaching, that sound I would recognize with my eyes closed. It was the Nissan that I paid for myself, the same one that Esteban drove as if it were his achievement. He entered the garage unceremoniously, his tires squealing on the hot cement. I stood in the back garden, kneeling among my rose bushes, the pruning shears still in hand. Did I hide? No, I just protected myself. I knew what was coming, and I didn't want to face those who only saw me as an emergency fund. Soon I heard the hurried footsteps, then the fists hitting the door hard. "Mama, open that door now. We need to talk." Then came Mariana's voice, higher, more cutting. "Have you gone crazy?" It made us feel ashamed. The mom was embarrassed. We had to leave like deadbeats from a restaurant on a Saturday. More beats. And there I was, with my hands dirty with dirt, looking at the newly opened red rose. A perfect flower, even born in thorn. "You're going to end up alone, Pamela. You'll regret it," she screamed. I heard, but I didn't get up. I didn't answer. I heard everything. The grumbling, the curses disguised as concern, the veiled threats. "If this leaks to the family, what will the neighbors think? You're throwing away the only family you have." Heavy words, spat in a hurry, as if the problem was not what they did to me, but the fact that I reacted. No. Inside I was still shaking. Cold hands. His stomach turned, but it wasn't fear. It was firmness. I knew at that very moment that there was no turning back. Old Pamela, the one who said, "Of course, son," even with a broken heart, she died there, sitting among the plants I cultivated with love. And in her place, a woman was born who chose her own silence as a shield. They kept trying for a few more minutes. Then, tired of talking to themselves, they left. The gate slammed hard. I waited a while, went into the kitchen and went to wash my hands. The earth came out slowly, but what I felt in my chest, this one wouldn't come out anytime soon. It was a mixture of sadness and relief. And then I thought, why does it take so long for us to choose ourselves? Why have we been taught that love is to give up, to accept everything, to be silent? There, drying my hands, I looked at the reflection of the window and whispered to myself, "No, Pamela. Now you are yours." But little did I know that what came next would be even harder. Because when the masks start to fall, the faces behind them can be more frightening than loneliness itself. And you'll see. The next call was not from Esteban. It was from someone I never expected to hear at that moment. And he came with poison in his voice. Do you know who it was? So prepare your heart. Because then, my daughter, the tables turned for good. The next day, I woke up early, as always. I made my coffee stronger than usual, as if that bitterness prepared me for what I needed to face. The night before was still fresh on my skin. The sound of the knocks on the door, the screams, Mariana's voice saying that I was going to die alone. Everything was still hammering. But now, instead of hurting me, it served as fuel. After breakfast, I went to the living room shelf and picked up an old diary. In it, I found a name that my friend Luz Maria had given me years ago, when her sister went through something similar. If you ever need a serious lawyer, call Don Arturo Salazar. He is discreet, fair, and the kind that listens. The number was still there, written in blue pen. Called. The secretary answered politely, and when I heard my name, I said, "Of course, Doña Pamela. Don Arturo can welcome you today at 3 p.m. I took a deep breath. I wrote down the address of the office, which was in the center of Guadalajara, near the Plaza de Armas. I put on my best blouse, the navy blue one that Ramon said matched my eyes, tied my hair carefully, and put all my documents and notes in an old elastic folder. I went by taxi. I didn't want to ask for a favor, nor depend on anyone. The path was silent. I looked at the streets passing by and thought, am I exaggerating? Is that really it? But deep down, I knew. That was not revenge. It was protection. Don Arturo received me in a simple room, with books everywhere and the smell of old wood. A man with well-combed white hair, a calm look, and hands that were not in a hurry. I sat down and bluntly told everything. From Esteban's childhood, from the helps, from the card, from Mariana's phrase in the cafe, from the phone call at the restaurant. I showed extracts, proofs, wrote everything down in a separate notebook. He listened. I only listened. When I finished, he crossed his hands and said to me, with a serenity that moved me, "Lo que usted hizo no es crueldad, Doña Pamela. Es legítima defensa financiera." And it was there that I fell apart. Not in loud crying, not in despair, but in a lonely tear that ran down my face and fell on my lap. Because I needed to hear that. I needed someone who would say, "You're not wrong." He explained everything to me. He directed me to write a new will, where I would make it clear that from that moment on, my assets would be protected, that no one, neither with tears nor with promises, could touch them without my permission. He also suggested that we strengthen my banking security. New passwords, accounts in my unique name, direct notifications just for me. I stayed there for almost 2 hours. I left lighter, with papers in hand and a firmer heart. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes, all a woman like me needs, it is to feel that it has been heard. I returned home by taxi, with the sun already falling on the buildings. I looked out the window and saw an elderly couple walking hand in hand in the square. Smile, not because I felt envious, but because I understood. I could still have a whole life, even on my own. Only, Esteban was not going to accept this so easily. And I found out the hard way. The next day, I found a letter. But it was not left by him. It was from someone I would never have expected. And what was written on it, it made my heart freeze. Because there are words that are not threats. They are traps. And I fell, without realizing it. Do you want to know what was in that letter? So stay with me. Because now, the truth began to reveal itself. It was in the silence of the next afternoon, as the sun pierced the kitchen curtain and spread across the tile floor, that I decided to sit down calmly to review my old invoices. He had kept almost everything. Envelopes piled up by year, loose notes, yellowed receipts. I was always careful, but I had never looked at it with the eyes of now. Before I read out of habit. Now I read for truth, and that's how the truth began to hurt in small doses. Each leaf I turned, I discovered a loose thread in a weave that I never imagined Mariana was capable of weaving. First came the signatures. 3 international magazines in English, Things I never read, never asked for, never took advantage of. Then, streaming services that didn't even match my taste. Contemporary European cinema, said one of them. All in my name. Everything was debited from my card, month after month. Kept. A gym in Zapopan, wine club, online meditation tuition. They were small amounts, 200, 300, 450 pesos. But they were there, repeated, constants, invisible until my eyes opened. And then came the coup, a purchase in San Miguel de Allende. Discharge, clothes, lodging, meals. Mariana had said that it was a wellness retreat, won in a raffle. But there it was. My name, my card number, my bill paying for her stay in one of the most expensive hotels in the city. I felt my stomach churn. Not hot anger, the kind that burns everything inside. It was worse. It was that icy anger, which comes with lucidity, clearly. They weren't just complacent. They weren't just unaccustomed. They truly believed that they had a right to my life, to my money, to my story. No, as I sat there, surrounded by papers and false memories, I realized something hard. Not all abuse screams. Some smile at you, call you beautiful mama while swiping your card. And it was at that moment that I understood. It was not just bad faith. It was conviction. They thought I owed it to them. If you're here listening to me, and you've been through something similar, if you've ever felt that someone you love sees you more as a resource than as a person, then stay with me, because there's still a part of the story that even I wasn't ready to see. And look, there is still a moment in this story that I have not forgotten to this day, a moment that made me tremble, but also gave me strength. And I'll tell you, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's just that the worst betrayal is not the one that screams. It's the one that comes disguised as affection. But what did I do after discovering all this? How did I react to seeing, with my own eyes, that Mariana had been using me for years, as if I were a silent bench? You'll see. Because the answer, it came in an unexpected envelope. And this time it wasn't an invoice. It was a call. And what was written there changed everything. Everything. It was a hot afternoon, one of those in which the wind seems to blow memories instead of relief. I was finishing sweeping the porch when I heard the gate slam softly. I went to the window, and there she was, Señora Celia, Mariana's mother, elegant as always, with the bag hanging from his forearm and a silk scarf around his neck. The kind of woman who doesn't say anything ugly, but thinks terrible things in a sweet voice. I opened the gate. She walked in with short steps, smelling of expensive perfume. "Pamela, honey, can we talk for a moment?" I took her into the living room, prepared coffee. Not for her, but for me. Making coffee has always helped me stay calm. We sat face to face. She straightened her skirt, took a sip and began. "Look, I came in the name of peace. I think there was a big misunderstanding. Mariana is very stressed. She said things without thinking. And Esteban, oh Pamela, he is devastated. He says he doesn't sleep, who doesn't understand what's happening." I heard her, every word, as if listening to the wind sway the curtains. She continued, "You've always been the pillar of this family, a woman of faith, of principles. I thought that, perhaps, we could solve this with affection. No scandals. You know, the neighbors, the church. This can turn into gossip, and no one wants that, right? Oh, the old reputation card, the fear of what they will say, public shame." I drank my coffee slowly, put the cup on the saucer, and with the same firmness that I had gotten out of bed every day since Ramon left, I looked into her eyes and said, "Yes, he spent his life on my roof, and he never built his." She froze, but he smiled, that smile of a woman who learned not to be shaken, and then came up with another. "We all made mistakes, Pamela, but forgiving is a gift. A mother does not give up on a child." I replied without raising my voice, "I'm not giving up. I'm choosing myself, something that took me 68 years to do." She tried again, this time appealing to the religious side. "God teaches to have compassion." I tilted my head slightly. "And it also teaches you not to be foolish." We were silent. She straightened her purse, crossed her legs, looked around as if trying to recognize the woman I was now. He didn't find it, because the Pamela from before, it was no longer there. When Celia got up to leave, she stopped at the door and said, "I just hope this doesn't become a scandal." People talk a lot. I accompanied her to the gate. Before she left, I replied, "The shame is not mine. The debt, yes, and it was paid with interest." I closed the gate calmly. I went back inside. The cup is still warm on the table, and at that moment, I stopped for a moment. No, some memories settle in us, as if they had life, and this afternoon was one of them. Because there are things that mark forever, not for what they hurt, but for what they reveal. If you have any memory like this, of a moment when you saw someone as they really are, or realized your own strength for the first time, share it with me here in the comments. Sometimes opening that chest helps more than keeping it silent. But the most curious thing about Celia's visit, it's just that she didn't come alone. He brought a second intention inside the bag, and I only found out when she was gone. Do you want to know what it was? So hold your heart, because inside that envelope, there was something that could change everything. Or almost. The day after Celia's visit, I already knew that something else would come. This was not just a request for peace, it was the rehearsal of a strategy. And I was right. Less than 48 hours later, I received at home a registered mail, signed by a lawyer I had never heard of. It was a formal notification. Esteban, pressured, I know, by Mariana, wanted to open an interdiction process. He claimed that I was emotionally unstable, and therefore, unable to manage my own assets. They said I needed to be protected, of myself. I read everything calmly. His hands did not tremble. The heart, yes, a little, because as much as I was getting stronger, I was still my son. He was still the boy I carried in my arms when he had measles, who I taught him to pray before going to sleep. But now, he wanted to take away my right to decide about my life. I picked up the phone and immediately called Don Arturo. He attended me with the serenity of someone who has seen many family wars start like this, with a beautiful signature and words disguised as concern. "Let's act, Doña Pamela. No panic. We will respond with elegance and evidence." I followed all the guidelines. We scheduled, later that week, a complete psychological evaluation. I went to Zapopan, in a lavender-scented office with good silence. The doctor was called Camilla, young, but with the eyes of people who see beyond words. She greeted me with a sweet smile, and for more than 2 hours, she listened to me. I told him everything, with details. I showed her documents, reports, even old family photos, so that she understood who I was, who I am, and why I was doing what I did. At the end, she closed the clipboard, looked at me and said, in that firm and calm voice, "If all the elderly had your clarity, half of the family abuse would end. You are not only lucid, you are more aware than many young people who cross this door." The report came out 3 days later. Top marks for emotional stability, critical awareness, autonomy, and discernment. I took it straight to Don Arturo's office. He ordered the rest of the case to be archived and instructed me to reinforce not only my legal protection, but also my physical and digital protection. I installed outdoor cameras in the house. I changed the passwords of the cards, emails, the bank. I started to keep copies of the documents in a small safe that was behind the bedroom closet. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Respect for the woman I have become. I spent a lifetime trusting. Now, I was learning to protect myself. And you know, there is something curious about this phase of life. We realize that lucidity is not only mental, it is spiritual. It's looking in the mirror and seeing that, even with wrinkles, with a lower voice, with a slower step, we still have the right and the duty to protect ourselves. With that done, I returned to my routine more lightly, but of course we knew that Esteban wasn't going to back down so easily. He never knew how to hear a no, and then came the next move, an invitation, a trap disguised as an attempt at reconciliation. Do you want to know where it all went? Well, the answer arrived on a Sunday, with the smell of cornmeal cake in the air, and an unexpected message on my cell phone. And what that message said, he made me close my eyes for long seconds before answering, because this time, I knew the tables were about to turn around. It was on a Sunday night that everything began to spread. Cousin Josefina, who lives near Tonalá, made a dinner to celebrate the 80 years of her husband, Don Hilario. I almost didn't go. I thought about staying at home, as I had been doing for the past few weeks. But something inside me said, "Go. He walks with the legs he still has. Show your presence, not your absence. I dressed calmly. The embroidered blouse I got from Luz Maria last Christmas, a discreet lipstick, and I went. I arrived, and the house was already full. Distant cousins, nephews I hadn't seen in years, people who only talk about dates like this. I greeted him with a smile and a hug, as I always did, but it only took a few minutes inside to realize that something had changed. I was no longer just Doña Pamela, Ramon's widow. The conversations dropped in tone when I passed. Some looked at me with a mixture of respect and curiosity, and it was in the punchline that I heard it for the first time. One of the uncles, half deaf, commenting too loudly. "Did you hear that Doña Pamela canceled all the cards? They say that Mariana was left with her face on the ground at El Cardenal." Another replied, "It's well done. That girl always treated Pamela as if she were a servant." I saw it with my own eyes. I froze, but I remained firm, with the glass in my hand. I wasn't the one who told him, and it didn't even have to be. The truth has such a thing. When it's strong enough, it spreads on its own. Throughout the night, more comments emerged, almost always in a low voice, but inevitable. She supported them, right? Poor Esteban. He sank with his wife. Pamela has always been too good. I just smiled in the corner, as if listening to old music in the depths of the soul. Justice was coming, not through my mouth, but through the tongue of others. That night, I realized the power of silence and coherence, because I didn't have to raise my voice or justify myself. It was enough to live the truth, and the rest came with the wind. Mariana, upon learning of the repercussion, was furious. I received 3 messages from her on the same day, one worse than the other, saying that I humiliated her, that I put her in a shameful position, that the whole family now sees her as a profiteer. But I wasn't the one who created this image. It was herself, with every improper purchase, every phrase of contempt, every laugh at my expense. Esteban still tried to call me, asking to talk, saying that everything was getting out of control. But I knew. He wasn't sorry. I was afraid of what others would think, because when shame hits, sometimes pride even screams louder. And you know, it tastes different when the truth reveals itself without you having to touch it. It's like a perfume that escapes from the bottle. Once in the air, no one can pretend they haven't felt it. That day, I slept with the window open. I let the wind in. I let him take away any trace of guilt. But what I didn't expect, it's just that in the following days, something much more serious was going to happen. A gesture that seemed small, but that would put all eyes, and all doubts, directly on Esteban. And it was there that it began to fall apart. Want to know what he did? You will understand why, sometimes, a mother's silence can echo louder than any scream. There were 5 days of silence after dinner at Cousin Josefina's house. 5 days when the phone rang, but I let it ring. When the messages arrived, and I just read, without responding. There was no longer any doubt in me, neither hurt nor anger, just a kind of firm calm, one of those you feel when you finally understand who is who. On the 6th day, the gate slammed. The noise was quieter than the other times. I walked to the window and saw Esteban standing there, alone, crestfallen, with his hands in his pockets, as he did when he was a boy and got up to no good. Open, not because of him, but because my heart was still an open house for truths. He went silent, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't ask for coffee. He sat in the chair in the living room as if the weight of his body was different. I remained standing. "Mama." His voice was weak, hoarse. "We need to talk." I nodded, emotionless. He began a rehearsed speech. He said that Mariana got excited, that things got out of control, that it was all a misunderstanding, that he was tired, pressured, that everything they did was on impulse. I heard, in silence, like so many other times. I know we made mistakes, but you know how it is. We settle down. He thinks he will always be able to count on you. And you're so good, so strong. I stopped listening with my ears and started listening with my soul. And the soul, I already knew the whole script. He started calling me Mamita, something he hadn't done in years. He tried to remember stories from his childhood, the serenades that Ramon played on birthdays, the time we went to the Sunday market together. Everything sounded empty, beautiful, but rootless. And then, when he saw that he was not being moved, he came with the last letter. "You don't want to die alone, do you?" Ah, my son. I took a deep breath. I stood there in front of him, my hands serene on my apron, and he said, "I'd rather die alone with dignity than surrounded by people who only see me as a bank account." He lowered his head. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he stood up, his eyes watering. "You don't know how much it hurts." I didn't answer, because he also didn't know how much it hurt me to pretend for so many years. He left with shuffling steps, and I remained there, standing still, listening to the sound of the door closing as if listening to a cycle close. No, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So, if you're here listening and feeling that this story, in some way, speaks to yours, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Let's make this story reach those who need it. Because what happened after that day, it was the beginning of something even bigger. A choice I made not out of hurt, but out of love for myself. And it is in this choice that silence finds its greatest strength. Want to know what it was? Then go with me, because the sweetest and strongest part is yet to come. The days following Esteban's last visit were unlike anything I had ever experienced. The house was quieter, yes, but it was a clean, fresh silence, like what comes after a heavy rain that washes the soul. For the first time in many years, I woke up without the anxiety of checking if there was a message asking for money, a pending bill, a favor disguised as kindness. I started to sleep better. My body, even old, began to really rest. And it was in this rest that I began to find pieces of myself that I had forgotten in some part of life. I went back to painting. I took my old watercolors that were stored in a box at the top of the closet. The brush trembled at first, not because of age, but because of the thrill of retouching a part of me that I had abandoned myself. I signed up for a cooking course at the Casa de la Cultura, right there in Tlaquepaque. Every Tuesday afternoon, I went on foot. I learned new recipes, rediscovered flavors, and the most beautiful, I met people, real people. It was there that I met Teresa, a lady with a firm look and a shy smile. Talking, we discovered that our stories were similar. She was also betrayed by her family. It also started late, and it was with her that I shared my first coffee away from home in months. A coffee that had no charges, no pretense, only presence. With the money I would have spent paying for Esteban and Mariana's trip to Playa del Carmen, yes, they had asked for that weeks before everything happened, I bought a new armchair, the kind that hugs us. I changed the curtains in the living room. I had the garden renovated, planted lavender in the left corner, where Ramon used to sit with the guitar. And, for the first time since his death, I scheduled a trip just for me, a weekend in Oaxaca. Simple, without luxury, but full of meaning. No, there are things that we only understand when we stop surviving and finally start living. And it's not that I didn't miss my son. Sometimes the smell of coffee reminds me of the times when he would run around the house with notebooks in his hands. But I understood that loving someone doesn't force you to endure everything. To love is not to accept abuse. To love sometimes is to move away, so as not to let the worst of the other destroy what is still best in us. And look, if you have come this far with me, I ask you one thing. Stay with me, because the strongest part, the one that taught me the most, is yet to come. Because just when I thought the story was over, life came and put something unexpected in my path. And that's when that everything has changed for good. Do you want to know what it was? So stay close, because what came to me, I could never imagine. Don Arturo's office had the window open that evening, and a gentle breeze crossed the papers on the table, as if even the wind wanted to participate in the moment. I sat on the leather armchair, adjusted my bag on my lap, and took a deep breath. It was the day to sign the New Testament, and I knew that this signature was not just a document. It was a milestone, a closure, and a new beginning, all at the same time. Don Arturo, always so serene, calmly explained every detail to me. "Are you sure, Doña Pamela?" he asked, with that respectful tone of someone who understands that he is facing a woman who has already made her decisions with a clean heart. I just nodded. It was what needed to be done. I divided my assets in a way that made sense to the woman I had become. 50% will go to a scholarship fund for vulnerable girls here in Jalisco. Girls like the ones I've taught all my life, like the ones I've seen abandoned by the empty promises of a future that never comes. It was my way of ensuring that, even after I'm gone, Some of my effort continues to help those who really need it. 30% I left to Maria Clara, my goddaughter. He never asked me for anything. He always visited me with cake or flowers, even when it wasn't a birthday. He called me just to find out if I needed something in the market. Silent respect is also a form of love, and she always treated me as a person, not as a resource. The last 20%, these I left for Esteban, but with a clause. And it was here that Don Arturo arched one of his eyebrows. It's rare to see a demand like this, but it's perfectly legal. I smiled. That was not for revenge. It was for justice. The clause said, Esteban will only be entitled to his share if he proves, for 5 consecutive years, financial independence. No donations, no aid, no shortcuts. Legitimate, proven work. A worthy man. If he succeeds, the part will be his. If not, her fate will be redirected to the girls' fund. Simple as that. I signed firmly. My hands didn't shake. There was no longer a shadow of doubt. Because more than taking something from my son, I wanted to give him the last chance to stand up on his own. He always had everything in his hands, except the opportunity to prove to himself that he was capable without me. And now, the choice would be his. I closed the pen. Don Arturo looked at me with restrained admiration. La justicia a veces llega en silencio, doña Pamela. And I replied, y a el silencio es la única voz que remaina. I left the office with lighter shoulders. There was no sadness, no sorrow. There was peace. A peace that comes when we stop expecting a return and start sowing only what we believe. But fate. Fate has its own paths. And what arrived at my door days after this signing, it was something that not even I, with all my motherly intuition, could have foreseen. Want to know what it was? So stay with me, because sometimes life reserves its last lesson at the moment when we think we have learned everything. The sun was setting with that reddish-orange color that only appears when the day says goodbye with dignity. I sat in my rocking chair, there on the balcony, as I did so often with Ramon. But now it was just me, the sound of the bells of the church of San Pedro ringing in the distance, and the blue notebook open on my lap. With the tip of the pen, I was drawing circles on the edge of the sheet before writing. Sometimes we need to stall a little to have the courage to touch the wound with words. But when I started, I didn't stop. I went down. I went to the ceiling. I was a table set. I was silence. I wrote this without haste, as someone who dumps what has been kept for decades. I was the arm extended when no one else was extending. I was the yes they were expecting even before asking. I was the excuse that justified their comfort and their absence as well. I closed my eyes for a moment. I heard the swallows passing by in flocks. I remembered Esteban's childhood, his eyes shining when he won a new ball, of when he hugged me tight and said, "You are the best mother in the world." Did he remember that? I continued writing. Today I am just what is left of me, after giving away everything I had, without asking. They took my savings, my strength, my patience, but they didn't take my essence. She fell asleep for a while, it's true, but now she's back. I looked at the sky, at that blue that is slowly darkening. There was no hurt inside me, just a gentle sadness for having taken so long to see. And that's what weighs the most. It is not the pain of having been forgotten. It's the pain of having forgotten me. How many times have I kept silent? How many times have I accepted less than I deserved, in the name of a misunderstood love? We, as mothers, sometimes think that sustaining is loving, that to give everything is to protect. And when we realize, there is nothing left of us. But I learned that love is not measured in how many checks we sign, but in how many limits we teach. That generosity without criteria turns into prison, and that obligation is never affection. It is a disguised charge. I took a rose from the vase next to it and touched it to my face. The perfume was soft, almost imperceptible, but it was hers, like me, still here, still whole. If you ask me if I regret it, I'm going to say no. Yes, I am sorry. It took so long to have left my dignity waiting in the back of the closet. But regret? No, because even if it was late, I chose myself. In this choice, everything changed. But you know the most curious thing? The most unexpected? It's just that after all this, after getting up, reorganizing my life, finding my peace again, the one who came knocking on my door again was not Esteban. Neither did Mariana. It was something I never imagined. An old, buried truth that decided to come back to the surface when I already thought that nothing else could surprise me. And when I heard, I almost dropped the pen. Want to know what it was? So stay a little longer with me. Because sometimes, it's in the last chapter that life reveals what really matters. The following Sunday, I put on my navy blue, that old dress I wore when I was the principal of the municipal school of Tlaquepaque. I put on a discreet lipstick, tied my hair with a pearl buckle, and went to Mass, alone. I walked slowly along the sidewalks, greeting the neighbors with a nod and a smile that, for the first time in many years, came from inside. At the door of the church, I heard from a former colleague, "You look like another woman, Pamela." And maybe she was right, because there, sitting on the wooden bench, listening to the bells and prayers, I was no longer the exhausted mother, nor the used woman. It was just me, in peace. When I left the church, I met Teresa, my friend from cooking classes. She invited me to lunch at the handicraft center. We sat at a corner table, ate freshly made tortillas, and laughed at simple things. A stumble, an old saying, a distracted waiter. And mind you, I didn't think about Esteban, not even in Mariana. For the first time in years, the food tasted like food, and not of sacrifice. It's strange to say, but it's as if the silence that accompanied me so much now had learned to respect me, because there, at that moment, he was no longer lonely. It was freedom. If you ask me today what I learned from all this, I would say that there is a huge difference between being good and being foolish, that love needs to have a limit, and that helping someone should never cost you who you are, that our time is sacred, what respect is not to beg, and that sometimes the greatest gesture of love is to teach someone to walk on their own legs, even if it hurts at first. I went down. I went to the ceiling. I was a shelter, and I was forgotten. But now I am free, and it is in this freedom that I found my place. Thank you, from the heart, for staying with me so far, for having listened to me, felt me, accompanied me. There are stories that we carry quietly for a lifetime, but counting is like opening a window. If this story touched your heart in any way, does it leave me a hug? Just click on this like, which for me is worth as a warmth holding hands. And if you want to come back for another coffee, subscribe here to the channel. There's always a seat at the table for you. Comment here which city you are listening to me from. I like to imagine these hearts scattered around the world, each with its own story, each with its own strength. And it activates the bell, see? That way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.